Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into a story that is filled with horror, thrill, and mystery. So make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Maddie, a young child, is loudly chewing on his pacifier while watching a movie in the cinema. Maddie dashes into the entrance and hides behind a cardboard poster when an usher finds out that he didn't pay for a ticket. At that moment, Hank Grogan and Ronnie, who are both theater workers, notice him, but Ronnie quietly helps him stay hidden. Eventually, Maddie attempts to hitchhike out of Derry after getting out of the theater. Then, a friendly-looking family takes him up, but their cheerfulness hides something strange. As they travel, the car inexplicably drives back to the city's center. There, the family begins to sing together, and the mother unexpectedly gives birth to a hideous mutant toddler who charges at Maddie. During the commotion, the creature takes his pacifier and pulls it out of his mouth, which sends it tumbling onto the concrete before crashing into an underground drain. 4 months afterwards, Derry seems peaceful on the outside, despite the occasional disturbing event that residents prefer not to investigate too thoroughly. Two veterans from the Korean War, Polly and Major Leroy Hanlon, went back to a close-by airfield. The military base is a critical strategic site in America's defense against Russia, and the men quickly discover a highly restricted storage facility intended for special projects. However, Major Hanlon, who's a farm-raised natural pilot and distinguished combat soldier, soon discovers himself challenged by disguised strangers who want private aircraft details. Despite this, some of Derry's kids continue to think about Maddie. Teddy Uris, a reserved and perceptive boy, is thinking about him often. Teddy and his outspoken friend Phil, who has a fascination with aliens, conspiracy theories, and the possibility of a nuclear war. Maddie, for reasons unknown, had been particularly fond of a girl named Lily, who was viciously teased by classmates as Loony Lily. Her harassment even grew further after her father's horrifying passing at a startling plant where, according to rumors, his remains had been identified, preserved in pickle jars across Maine. So his tale ended up becoming a wicked punchline at school, forcing Lily to contend with hurt, regret, and separation. One night, Lily says she heard Maddie's voice echoing through the plumbing in her home. Teddy and Phil disregard this until Teddy has a frightening vision. His lampshade starts to blink, and for a brief moment, the lamp seems to be made from human skin. Teddy feels shaken and no longer questions Lily. Hoping to find what really happened to Maddie, the trio heads to the library and begins to search through old documents. Their investigation brings them to Ronnie in the movie theater. Ronnie is taken aback when the children claim they've heard the same haunting tune from The Music Man, which is the film Maddie watched the night he had vanished and seen diabolical visions similar to his own. Ronnie lets them into the cinema after hours. As he switches on the projector, the film comes to life, and Maddie's ghost appears on the screen, holding the hideous mutant baby. Suddenly, the creature gets loose and moves into the theater. It cuts through the audience in a terrifying chaos, killing everyone except Ronnie and Lily, who remain alive only by luck. Lily's screaming fills the theater as those who survived run into the night. As Lily wakes up from a nightmare about the theater massacre, the CGI-like mutant baby is still fresh in her mind. However, it was not a nightmare because the deaths were real, and the suspicion rapidly shifted to Hank Grogan, Ronnie's father and the theater's manager. Soon, the police surround the Grogan home, requesting answers. Hank says he was in bed during the assault, and while his defense is valid on documents, the police are not persuaded. Hank's mother, unfazed, encourages him to focus on bringing Ronnie back to school, believing that education is the way out of Derry. Across town, Major Leroy Hanlon and his wife Charlotte and their son Will move into their new home after coming back from Korea. Others look on them with an air of anxiety, but Will is far more intrigued by the telescope that Charlotte gave him for stargazing. However, Leroy remains nervous. The disguised intruders at the airfield keep weighing in on him, and he is wondering if they have a connection to Masters, a soldier who didn't salute him earlier. Colonel Fuller promises to act, but Leroy's senses tell him that something substantially greater is unfolding down below the surface. At school, Ronnie ends up being a target of malicious gossip, especially from the popular girls. Marge, who is Lily's shady friend, tries to separate from her by condemning Lily for engaging with Ronnie, but Lily chooses not to speak up. Meanwhile, Will is quickly targeted by bullies as well, and Charlotte feels uneasy by the town's casual disposition toward abuse. Leroy tells her to keep quiet while referring to an event in Shreveport that Charlotte particularly avoids bringing up. On the other hand, Ronnie is already on edge and has a terrible vision in which she finds herself trapped deep within her mother's womb, submerged and fighting to get out. Suddenly, her mother's distorted figure punishes her for breaking herself as an umbilical cord drags her to a hideous, tooth-filled womb. The hallucination only ends when Hank snaps her awake. Elsewhere, Derry's chief of police, later known as Chief Bowers, is seated in a bar enjoying himself while residents urge him to arrest Hank Grogan. Krogan. At that point, Dick and a group of other black soldiers get kicked out for being disruptive, but are subsequently released at the base gate. With that, he is given the task to dig at multiple places, but the Colonel gets eager for outcomes. Back in school, Ronnie meets Lily at lunchtime and requests that she tell the truth with regard to the theater monster. However, Lily hesitates, fearful of going back to Juniper Hills, which is surprisingly the most secure place she knows. As the fight escalates, Lily gets detained for throwing insults at Ron. Similarly, Will is also taken away after being convicted of a stink explosion prank that he did not carry out. After that, Lily gets transported to the police station, in which Chief Bowers asks her to say she has no idea if Hank attended during the theater murder. Fearing going back to Juniper Hills, she agrees, leading to Hank's arrest. Ronnie goes after Lily following that, angry at the alleged betrayal, but Lily's mother steps in, locking the door and ending the argument. Meanwhile, at the airbase, Leroy discovers that Masters was not the disguised intruder the night before. The skill and speed needed for operating the gun did not match his. After speaking with General Shaw, Leroy finds out that General Shaw personally designed the operation while looking for a courageous soldier for an assignment of critical national importance. While going shopping, Lily encounters another dreadful vision. There are voices mocking her. The cereal boxes twist to show the faces of the dead, and the aisle turns into a prison of pickles, with one jar bending to reveal her father's face. Startled, she breaks the jar, but the shop manager calls her back to reality as she sees one broken jar on the ground. As Lily arrives to Juniper Hills, Shaw educates the airbase team on a Cold War mission that uses fear as a weapon. The entity that they're tracking, called IT, is believed to be surrounded by enigmatic beacons, which, if discovered, might enable them to confront it. Soon after, a car was discovered at an excavation site which showed human bones. The finding ties together the abductions, Derry's terrifying events, and the ongoing attempts to comprehend and regulate the supernatural being. If you're enjoying this recap so far, please hit like and subscribe for more. In 1908, a young Francis wandered through a crowded carnival, feeling out of place. As he explored, he noticed a sinister clown lurking in the shadows. Urged to enter the Hall of Mirrors alone, he reluctantly stepped inside, where he caught fleeting glimpses of a strange figure trailing him. An elderly man lurking in the darkness frightened him so badly that he bolted outside, crashing into his stern father, who told him to man up. On the way home, their vehicle broke down, and Francis was sent to fetch water. In the forest, he met a girl named Rose, who convinced him to trade away his slingshot. After spending a brief moment together, Francis continued deeper into the woods, only to encounter the same old man again. This time, the figure transformed into a monstrous humanoid and pursued him through the trees. Just as the creature closed in, Rose appeared and struck it with the slingshot, saving his life. At the moment, Lily is preparing for her departure from Juniper Hills. While she was away, Ronnie turned into a target at school, especially among the popular girls. Someone even scrawls "Hatchet Hank" on her locker, which Ronnie furiously removes. Lily, who is still covered with marker from the cleanup, steps in to help and alerts Ronnie of her troubling supermarket vision. She demands photographic evidence of the being, but neither of them understands how to process film. With that, they decide that it is time to add new members to their group. Meanwhile, Hank is still in custody, disconnected and silent. His assertion that he was in bed on the evening of the assault fails to convince Chief Bowers, who ridicules him and asks for his preferred cigarette brand, which the police already knew about. So, now unless Hank can demonstrate that he's not guilty, he risks being labeled a child murderer. At the airfield, General Shaw continued his hunt for Pennywise, employing Dick as a human compass throughout a helicopter search. Dick got a box that contained the slingshot from Francis and Rose's encounter many years ago. When he grasped it, he was overcome by a vivid memory of the murderous clown and heard an alert meant for his grandmother. When he gained awareness, he nearly fell from the aircraft as he headed toward the back hatch, but Leroy stopped him just in time. Dick, distraught, vented his developing dissatisfaction with the military's tactics, warning that their methods could have catastrophic effects. Meanwhile, Native American communities came together to voice their oppositions to the excavation of dig sites, worried that unidentified burial sites could be destroyed. Rose acknowledged their worries and issued cessation notifications, which brought General Shaw to the discussion. When Shaw showed up, it was made clear that he was the Francis from the initial flashback. Despite his stated desire to work together with them, Rose was doubtful of his motives. On the other hand, Rich and Will are drawn in by the kids to assist with the film's development. Rich, who is acquainted with the occult due to his uncle's Santeria practice, leads the group in their attempt to call upon Pennywise. They established candles in a cemetery while carrying out the ritual, attempting to entice the supernatural being to show up. Back at the Hanlon house, Dick has a meal with Leroy, who was taken aback to learn that Dick has a son, Will. Later, on the porch, Leroy questions Dick with regard to his helicopter vision. Dick defines his ability to get into people's minds and guarantees Leroy that he won't get involved with his thoughts. Meanwhile, the cemetery ritual seems to fail and monsters attack the kids. They flee by bicycle, taking pictures of the soaring beings. However, Will gets left behind while wandering an empty cellar alone, but he snaps another photo before catching up with the group, until the kids reunite and journey back to school together. As the photos develop, the group affirms the occult event they observed. observed. In Will's crypt photo, a frightening silhouette of a killer clown appears, offering the first actual proof of Pennywise's existence. This discovery affirms their will for facing the entity. Following the awful cemetery chase with Pennywise, Ronnie and the other kids present their pictures to Chief Bowers, attempting to establish the entity's presence. However, most of the photos seem normal, except for one that reveals the clown's form. With that, Bowers disregards it as a statue, and the children's assertions go ignored. Meanwhile, Rose speaks to Charlotte Hanlon, dropping details about her husband Leroy's secrets. Charlotte says that Derry is lovely, but things happen, presumably referring to the town's hidden perils. With that, Rose provided her phone number and assured her of assistance if needed. Soon after, Will also tells Charlotte about having been pursued through the cemetery, sobbing in her arms. Still, she chose not to contact Leroy about it, worrying that it may worsen the danger. After that, Charlotte arranges to go fishing to help Leroy connect with Will. While they sit by the water, Will conveys his increasing fear of the supernatural being and his affection for Ronnie. When left alone in the water, Will has frightening visions of his dad promising that he will burn too. Leroy first disregards the boy till he observes the wounds on Will's wrists as well as an unsettling red balloon floating over the lake. Charlotte also gives Hank a visit while in custody, worried about his forced confession and the supernatural happenings in Derry. Drawing on her background in defending falsely accused men in the South, she helps Hank in filing documents citing prejudice and permitting him to wait for trial while under house arrest. However, Hank's cover story is put at risk when he reveals the truth that he had an affair with a white woman that evening, thereby placing him in serious danger. Meanwhile, Dick and the boys gain entry to a retired underground facility and quickly set it up as their new base. Leroy informs Dick about Will's assault and states he has no idea what is following them. Aside from that, it is dangerous. Will also alerts the group that Pennywise is trying to scare them prior to feeding, and Lily provides medication to protect them from fear-induced paralysis during their following encounter. At school, Marge encounters pressure from Patty and the other popular kids to deceive Lily into telling her love story. She pauses in the bathroom, recognizing the cruelty of the joke, and then gets seized by an awful vision from Pennywise. Her eyes puff up, and she runs to the school lab where she uses a bandsaw to get rid of what she thinks is a parasite within her. Lily quickly catches up, but when the other students arrive, they misinterpret the scenario and find Lily accountable. That night, Will uses his telescope to occupy himself, yet he observes Pennywise peering back at him. With this, Leroy heads outside and notices a red balloon stuck in a tree, which increases his feelings of worry. Frustrated, he goes back to base and presents General Shaw with his predicament. Shaw connects him to Taniel, a young Native American boy who is investigating the area beyond the dig sites. Taniel understands how Pennywise came to be. He reveals that he landed on a fallen star and was ultimately bound by his forefathers. 13 shards of the star have been deposited in the local forest, earlier carved by flames, but now hidden by time itself. Taniel employs Dick's psychic abilities to help him find the shards. He also reveals an outdated, decaying house that could contain the secret to locating these pillars. With this information, the scope of the danger grows clear that Pennywise is an ancient cosmic being and not a local menace. The kids, along with Dick, Leroy, and Taniel, now have a clear path to gathering everything needed to deal with it. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments for more interesting videos like this.